Welcome to the meeting of the Metro Property Rights Action Committee. It's a landlord group in Minneapolis primarily. We meet each month at the Martin Luther King Park in South Minneapolis between 6:30 and 8:30. We welcome members of the public. Our focus, however, is on city issues, mainly crime and housing issues. But right now we're having a city election this year in 2009, so we're trying to give candidates for city council, mayor, other city offices a chance to explain their campaigns and why they should receive public support for the election this year. My co-host is Jim Swartwood. He's the publisher also of the Watchdog newspaper, which is a free circulation newspaper on newsstands around town. We have a guest. Jim, why don't you introduce our guest and we'll get started with our show.
This is Kris Broberg, who's running for councilman on the 13th ward, is that right? Against Betty Hodges, who's a one-term council person. Lights? Yeah, well, why don't you give us a little bit of your philosophy?
Okay. I was sent an email just earlier today that I would have this opportunity, and I just thought about it for a few minutes here, but I do have a little bit of a somewhat prepared rambling thing, but thank you again for all of you for having me here, and excuse me from looking from the camera back to you and all of that. My name is Kris Broberg, and I'm running for Ward 13 City Council, and you know, like I said, I just found out about this 130, but I really didn't want to miss this opportunity because I think property rights are the fundamental issue in a city election, and it's that important that I wanted to make sure I was here. And the reason is because the city level government takes the most infringements upon your property rights of any level of government. They infringe your property through property taxes, assessments, inspections, fees, fines, zoning, building codes, permits, regulations, and each and every one of these levels is, so in essence, as long as you pay them and you follow all their rules, and if you need to fix the place up, you got to get their permission, of course, don't forget that. And then, of course, they'll tax you more for that after you do that. But as long as you follow all those rules, yeah, you have lots of property rights. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from on this. I think of myself sort of as a radical on property rights, and one of my reasons for running is because I feel strongly that people should be able to do with their property what they want. And the reason is because it's not just a philosophical thing, it's a thing that will make the city better. If people are allowed to come to the city and create the dream for themselves that they want, you know, through their property, run the business they want, the property they want, the house they want, you know, then this is going to be a city filled with dreams for people. If you come here and it's city planners saying, oh, this is only this type of house, and this business, and this, and the city planners plan everything in, if you don't like it, your only option is to leave. I'd rather have a place where everybody can come here and do their own thing. And I think that's a beautiful thing about true property rights, is that people can do that. So, you know, and it comes to, I have a few stories of things, you know, and part of the problem with the city control is just the capriciousness of the control. I've tried to get a permit, you know, to enclose a porch on a property. I enclosed the first level porch. You know, the second level I decided to address at a later time because of funds. And I went in and I had to go back 6 times before I could get that permit. I didn't change anything I asked for. I just talked to different people each time. And finally, the last person I just begged, I said, listen, I'm perfectly willing to leave this looking like this. You know, I brought a picture that time. But, you know, I'm begging you just to do this. And she was nice enough. She made up an excuse. If I put a certain amount of windows in, then I can fix up my property. And then, of course, once I fix it up, they hammer me with taxes, you know. But at least they did let me know. But it's just the capricious nature of basically government bureaucrats, not even elected officials, deciding what you can do with your property. Just the government bureaucrats. In fact, one time I went in, second time I went in, the guy told me, actually, well, you know, it's zoned R1 now, and we'd like to see your triplex just go away and turn back into a single-family home. That's what the guy told me. This is just a hired bureaucrat, the city helping you out, okay? I have some serious issues.
Now, if that burned up, that would go back to an R1.
Well, I did ask that question, and they said as long as you submit a building application within a certain period, I don't remember if it was 90 days or something, that you can rebuild a triplex. You don't lose that right for that property. But that's the attitude of what we're dealing with, and I think that it's ridiculous and insane. And then we talk about property taxes. This is another thing I found since it's actually the reason I'm running. I went to a property tax forum and we had it, and I don't know if you realize this, I'm sure you're all affected by the property taxes, but I saw a city budget through 2018, and they've budgeted in, just as a starting point, 8% per year property tax increases. Okay, that's just as a starting point. Okay, but what's, you know, and then I looked at our current city council person's website, and she says, well, Minneapolis has its fiscal house in order. You know, how can you have your fiscal house in order when you're budgeting in a doubling of property taxes by 2018, but then at the same time, they are leaving off-budget pension funds? It's a huge problem. She said those pension funds will actually make our property tax increases be double that. That means our property taxes double in about 4.5 years when you figure those back in, and I don't see why they are figuring them out, because we're going to have to pay that one way or the other. It's one of their major liabilities.
You know, Chris, I just came out of tax equalization board, I guess, and argued about the values of over a dozen properties. And I mean, I see what they came back with. I mean, they changed them for a decrease, but the decrease is a fraction of what the properties actually are selling for. I mean, these properties, like 120, I think I paid 20,000 for, maybe 10,000 worth. But I mean, you know, there's some I paid 10,000 for, and they're going for 100,000. So I mean, these are you know, in one district I had 144 comps, and 4 were not bank savings. And they said, well, we can't take those 140. We got to throw those out. Got to take the bank savings. I said, well, that's like saying the world is flat. But you know, I mean, so I persevered on this a little bit. But I mean, we're getting, you know, $5,000 off on something that, you know, should be more like
in taxes or valuation.
In valuation. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
It's fun to clarify. No, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's all over the city, and it isn't about, you know, you just realize when they value your property and they tax you, it isn't about your value of your property versus what you should be taxed. It's about how much money they want.
The problem that I ran into is they're using appraisal factor based off the appraised value of rents at a factor of 6. The standard equivalation for rent factor is actually 10. And by doing that, they're increasing the amount of the value higher than what it should be compared to what an average appraiser would use. And what's interesting is the appraiser who came out from the city is licensed in another state, but not even licensed in the state of Minnesota. I asked her, are you licensed in Minnesota? She's like, no, I'm not, but I work for the city. I'm like, well, why don't you have to have an appraisal license for the state? I thought that was interesting. How can you appraise a property if you're not properly licensed in the state?
Maybe just a wild thought here. Maybe we shouldn't even worry about licensing for appraisers. But I do agree with the problem that you're stating, in that. But it's not. Again, it's not about, you know, in an individual basis for each of us. Obviously, I'm going to be very supportive of people paying as little in taxes as you can. But ultimately, it's about how much the city wants. If everybody goes and complains about the value of their property, you know, then they're going to raise the mill rate on everyone. So it isn't, you know, it's about their spending. It's about the ridiculous, you know, the controlling nature. I mean, they become so much more controlling. Even in the 12 years I've lived here, and I manage properties. I'm a landlord, and I'm very sympathetic to all of these issues, and that's why I'm, you know, at least one of the big reasons I want to be able to afford to live in the city too, and that's the other reason I'm running. But these are very important issues to me.
Kris?